Hey guys, Dakoba here, and today we have a raid leading guide for Uunat, Harbinger of the Void, the second boss in the Crucible of Storms raid, World of Warcraft Battle for Azeroth. And today we're going to look at three different things. First, the group composition and important things to keep in mind as you build your group. Second, assignments to make to different players within the group before the fight starts. And third, important calls to make during the fight to make sure that all of the critical moments are handled correctly. Now, as far as group composition goes, any tanks should be okay for this fight, although tanks who benefit from having multiple enemies attacking them is helpful here. So druids in particular have multiple targets to build rage off of, and then paladins who gain additional mitigation for the number of targets they're fighting can do well as the number of adds build up in each phase. In addition to that, you'll want to have your standard complement of buffs and debuffs. That's your warrior, your priest, and your mage, as well as a monk and demon hunter. Lastly, for this fight, it's helpful to have a death knight or two to grip up the mindbenders that spawn in phase 2. This just makes cleaving those enemies down much easier, and so it's really nice to have if they're available. If not, you can do without, but again, it's nice to have. Lastly, a hunter running a devil'alor pet, so a beastmaster hunter, or an arms warrior to apply the mortal bleed debuff to the boss. This will reduce the damage that they heal from players who misstep and run into the void tears. Now, the other thing that we found that was helpful here was to have a single druid healer running a 2-minute tranquility, as well as as many warriors as we could stack for rallying cries. We ran with 2 warriors, but a third would certainly not have gone amiss there as well. As far as important assignments to make before the fight go, it's critical that each of the artifacts be handled properly, so you'll want to assign players to each of those. You'll have both tanks pick up the trident, one of them to pick it up at the beginning of the fight and use it at the phase 1 transition, and then have the second tank pick it up in phase 2 once it's off cooldown and use it at the phase 2 transition. Similarly, you'll have healers pick up the void crystal to use either immediately before or after those phase transitions just to clear the arena of the void tears, and the DPS, you'll have 2 DPS use the crown alongside the trident in order to leave down the adds and clear the arena of adds at each phase transition. Now, the other important assignments to make are to organize your healing and defensive cooldowns into 3 groups. One of these for the I-beams in phase 1, and then 2 for each of the crown and trident phase transitions. Now, these groups, the timing of these abilities works out nicely, that you can use the same group for the I-beams in phase 1 as you use for the first set of I-beams in phase 3. You can use the second group, the one that covers the phase 1 to 2 transition, for the second set of I-beams, and the third group that covers the phase 2 to 3 transition comes up a little short with the third set of I-beams in phase 3. That's why we ran that druid with the 2-minute tranquility, because it allowed that player to have those healing cooldowns available for both of those. Now, that third set of I-beams in phase 3 is also where we called for any immunities we have and any personal defensive and healing cooldowns, so things like lock rocks, healing potions, aspect of the turtle, paladin bubbles, monk bubbles, whatever we had, just to survive that. At that point, the boss was only at 4 or 5% health left, and so it was just critical for the group to get through that phase in pretty good shape and just finish it off. Now, the last thing you'll want to assign, if you have 2 shamans in the group, you want to assign tremor totems for each of the fears in phase 2. With 2 shamans, they can alternate to cover all of the fears. As far as important calls to make, we found that it was useful to both announce the I-beams as well as walk players through how to handle them each time they spawn, telling them to get to the nearest I-beam, pass through it quickly, let the debuff fall off, and then find and pass through the second I-beam and wait for that debuff to fall off. We also announced healing cooldowns here, and again, I had those assigned into groups 1 and 3, so we called it the group 1 healing cooldowns in phase 1. In phase 2, it's helpful to announce the fears. It is possible for a player to have their camera in such a position that they don't see the edge of the fear ring, so it's difficult to tell whether you're in or out of it if you just happen to have your camera at that specific angle. So announcing that fear ensures that players that are able to get out of that. We also found that it was helpful to call for the add switches in phase 2. The first set of mindbenders that spawn actually heal about 7 seconds after they spawn when the boss reaches 100 energy, and so it was best to keep DPS on the boss until that heal had gone off, and then have them switch and burn down those adds quickly. For the second and third sets, simply switch as soon as they spawn, and calling those will help make sure that switch goes smoothly. Lastly, you'll want to make sure you're calling major cooldowns again for each of the phase transitions, as well as for when you want each of the artifacts. So make sure you're timing the void crystal at a point where you're pretty sure the group's not going to be taking very much damage, and the crown and Crown and Trident when you have the opportunity to burn down those adds and stack within the Trident bubble in order to keep it from wiping your group. Once you get into phase 3, make sure you're calling for each of the healing cooldown groups for each of the I-beams. We use the same group in phase 1 that we used for the first I-beam in phase 3. For the phase 1 to 2 transition covered the second I-beam, and for the phase 2 to 3 transition covered the third I-beam. Now these ones only happen about 2.5 minutes apart, so that's where that second tranquility came in really handy. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments section below. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe.